The first box slipped from my hands when Claire Whitmore looked straight at me, tears trembling in her pale green eyes, and said, "You should have been mine." It was the last thing I expected to hear while standing in the bright afternoon sun outside her new apartment, surrounded by furniture, cardboard boxes, and the broken pieces of two different lives. What made it worse was that Claire was not a stranger, an old friend, or someone I had casually dated. She was the younger sister of the woman I had once planned to marry. Before we go any further, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe kindness can heal old wounds, forgiveness can rebuild shattered hearts, and second chances sometimes arrive when we least expect them. My name is Everett Cole, and 3 years earlier, I had believed my future belonged to Claire's older sister, Madeline. Madeline was ambitious, charming, and impossible to ignore. She could walk into a quiet room and make everyone feel as though something important had just begun. I met her at a charity auction in Portland, Maine, where I was helping my uncle display handcrafted furniture from our family workshop. She laughed at one of my nervous jokes, asked me about the grain in a walnut dining table, and stayed beside me for the rest of the afternoon. We were together for nearly 4 years. By the second year, I had bought a ring. By the third, we had chosen a wedding venue overlooking the harbor. By the fourth, I learned that loving someone deeply did not always mean you truly knew them. Claire had always existed at the edge of our relationship, quiet where Madeline was dazzling, thoughtful where Madeline was impulsive. She worked as an elementary school librarian and spent her weekends restoring old books, volunteering at an animal shelter, or helping her widowed father maintain the weathered family house. During holidays, Claire was usually the person washing dishes after everyone else had wandered away. She remembered how people took their coffee, noticed when someone had stopped laughing, and never demanded attention for the kindness she gave. I liked her, but I had never allowed myself to look at her too closely. She was Madeline's sister, and that fact had been a locked door in my mind. Even after the engagement ended, I kept that door closed. Madeline left me 6 weeks before the wedding. She did not leave because of an affair, though at first I almost wished she had. An affair would have given me someone to hate and a clear reason to stop asking questions. Instead, she sat beside me on a sunlit bench near the marina and admitted she had accepted a position in California without telling me. She had already signed the contract, rented a condominium, and decided that marriage would make her feel trapped. She said she loved the life we had imagined more than she loved the reality of building it with me. I remember watching white sailboats cross the harbor behind her while my entire future collapsed in broad daylight. She returned the ring, apologized without crying, and flew west 3 days later. The Whitmore family treated the breakup like an unexpected death. Madeline's father, Harold, called me twice to apologize for something that was not his fault. Her mother had passed away years before, and Harold had once told me he thought of me as the son he never had. Claire sent only one message. It said she was sorry, that I had deserved honesty, and that she hoped one day I would understand the ending was not proof that I had been unworthy of love. I read that message so many times the words became permanently carved into my memory. Still, I never answered. Responding felt too painful, and disappearing seemed easier than admitting I had lost not only a fiancé but an entire family. For 3 years, I buried myself in work. The furniture shop expanded, my uncle retired, and I became responsible for 12 employees and more orders than I knew how to manage. People praised my discipline, but discipline was simply loneliness wearing a respectable coat. I stopped attending weddings. I avoided the marina. I dated twice, but both relationships ended before they had truly begun because every time someone asked what I wanted from the future, I realized I no longer trusted the future enough to answer. I heard occasional news about Madeline through mutual friends. She had changed jobs twice, become engaged to someone else, and later ended that engagement too. I told myself I felt nothing. The truth was more complicated. I did not want her back, but some wounds remain tender long after we stop wishing for the person who caused them. Then, on a clear Tuesday morning in early June, Claire called the workshop. At first, I barely recognized her voice. She sounded older, steadier, but there was a strain beneath every word. She told me Harold had suffered a mild stroke and needed to move into an assisted living community closer to his doctors. Claire had been caring for him almost alone while also working full-time. She had sold the old family house because the stairs and maintenance had become too much, and she was moving into a smaller apartment nearby. The movers she hired had cancelled after their truck broke down. She said she knew it was unfair to ask, but Harold's furniture had to be collected before the new owners took possession the following day. I looked around my workshop at the unfinished cabinets and delivery schedules. Every practical instinct told me to give her the number of another moving company. Instead, I heard myself say I would bring one of our vans and 2 employees by noon. When I arrived at the Whitmore house, the memories hit me before I reached the porch. The maple tree where Madeline and I had once hung paper lanterns for a summer party was taller. The front steps had been repainted, but I could still remember Claire sitting there with a mug in both hands, listening while Harold told the same fishing story for the 10th time. Bright sunlight poured through the open front door. Claire stood in the hallway wearing jeans, a faded blue sweater, and her hair tied loosely behind her neck. She looked exhausted. There were shadows beneath her eyes, and she seemed thinner than I remembered. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she thanked me with such visible relief that the distance of 3 years disappeared beneath the weight of everything that needed to be done. That we spent the afternoon carrying out boxes, chairs, lamps, framed photographs, and the old oak desk that had belonged to Claire's mother. My employees handled the largest furniture while Claire and I sorted what would go to Harold's new room and what belonged in her apartment. She apologized repeatedly for the disorder. I told her she did not have to apologize for surviving a difficult season. The words made her stop. She looked at me as though I had said something she had needed to hear for months. Then she smiled, but the smile quickly faded when we found a box of wedding decorations in the attic. Inside were ivory ribbons, unused place cards, and a wooden sign with my name beside Madeline's. Claire reached for the lid, but I had already seen it. The sight did not break me the way it once would have. Instead, I felt an old sadness settle quietly inside my chest. Claire said she had tried to throw the box away years earlier, but Harold could not bear to let it go because he had believed I would return to the family somehow. I told her Harold had loved an idea of what we might have become. Claire lowered her eyes and said some ideas were difficult to bury because they had felt more honest than what actually happened. There was something in her tone I could not understand, but before I could ask, one of my employees called from downstairs. We carried on, yet the air between us had changed. At Harold's assisted living community, we arranged his room beside a wide window overlooking a garden. He was weaker than I remembered, but his face brightened when he saw me. He gripped my hand and said my presence made the room feel like home. Claire turned away, pretending to adjust a stack of books. Harold asked about the workshop, teased me about still being unmarried, and then spoke of Madeline with the blunt honesty illness sometimes gives people. He said she had called twice since his stroke but had not come home. Her career was busy, her flights were complicated, and she promised to visit later in the summer. Claire defended her, saying Madeline cared even if she did not always know how to show it. Harold's expression hardened with disappointment. He said Claire had spent her entire life making excuses for people who left her carrying everything. The words wounded Claire more deeply than he intended. She stepped into the garden, and I followed after giving Harold time to rest. The afternoon was warm, with sunlight flashing across the small fountain near the walking path. Claire stood beside a row of roses, pressing her fingers against her eyes. She said she loved her father, but caring for him had consumed her. For months she had slept on a couch near his bedroom, afraid he would fall. She had used most of her savings to repair the house before selling it. Her long-term boyfriend, Grant, had ended their relationship because he said her family responsibilities left no room for him. Claire had not told anyone how frightened she was about starting over at 34 with an aging father, a new apartment, and a life that suddenly felt much smaller than the one she had hoped to build. That I wanted to tell her she was strong, but the word felt insulting. People often call someone strong when they are grateful they do not have to carry that person's burden. Instead, I told her she deserved help. I admitted I should have answered her message after the engagement ended. Claire said she had not expected an answer. She had only wanted me to know that Madeline's choice did not define my worth. I asked how she had known exactly what to say. Claire looked toward the fountain and replied that she knew because she had spent much of her own life feeling invisible beside her sister. Madeline had always been chosen first. Madeline received admiration, forgiveness, opportunities, and attention without asking. Claire learned to be useful because usefulness was the only way she knew to feel necessary. Her confession stayed with me as we drove to her apartment. I began noticing things I had ignored years before. Claire had always been the person who checked whether I had eaten during long family gatherings. She had defended my woodworking when Madeline complained it was not prestigious enough. She had once driven 2 hours to deliver the speech notes I had forgotten before an important business presentation. At the time, I had accepted those acts as evidence that she was simply kind. Now I wondered how much it had cost her to remain kind while watching her sister take for granted the life Claire may have quietly wanted. By late afternoon, most of the boxes were inside Claire's apartment. My employees returned to the workshop, but I stayed to assemble her bed frame and repair a damaged bookcase. Sunlight streamed through the windows, turning the bare rooms golden. Claire unpacked dishes in the kitchen while an old radio played softly on the counter. The scene felt strangely peaceful, almost domestic, and that frightened me. I had spent years avoiding attachment, yet being near Claire did not feel like opening an old wound. It felt like discovering a room in a familiar house that I had somehow never entered. The moment came when I carried the final box from the van. Its bottom tore open near the doorway, spilling books and framed photographs across the floor. One photograph landed face up between us. It had been taken at a summer picnic years before. Madeline stood in the center, smiling toward the camera, while I was turned slightly away, laughing at something Claire had said. Claire reached for the picture, but I picked it up first. I noticed the way she had been looking at me. It was not a sisterly glance or a casual smile. It was quiet, unguarded affection that I asked her how long she had felt that way. Claire went still. She could have denied it, but she was too tired to hide. She said it had begun before Madeline and I became serious, though she had never acted on it. She had watched me fall in love with her sister and decided the honorable thing was to step aside. She had encouraged Madeline to appreciate me, defended our relationship, and even helped plan parts of the wedding because she believed love meant wanting someone to be happy even when their happiness excluded you. After Madeline left, Claire had wanted to come to me, but she feared I would think she was taking advantage of my heartbreak. Then the months became years, and silence hardened around everything she had never said that I told her she should not have carried that alone. Claire laughed bitterly and said carrying things alone was what she did best. Then she looked at the half-unpacked apartment, the boxes from her father's house, and the photograph in my hand. Her composure finally broke. Tears filled her eyes as she said she had spent years watching Madeline receive love without knowing how to protect it. She said I had been loyal, patient, and willing to build a real life rather than chase appearances. Then her voice dropped, and she whispered the words that made the box slip from my hands. "You should have been mine." For several seconds, the only sound was the radio humming on the kitchen counter. I wanted to move closer, but fear held me still. Claire immediately apologized. She said the move, her father's illness, and seeing me again had overwhelmed her. She insisted I should forget what she had said. But I could not forget it, because some truths do not feel surprising once they are spoken. They feel like something your heart had already recognized while your mind was still refusing to look. That I told Claire I could not offer her an answer born from guilt, nostalgia, or gratitude. She deserved more than becoming the person I chose because Madeline had left. Claire nodded, though the pain on her face deepened. I continued before she could retreat. I said I also could not pretend I felt nothing. The woman standing before me was not merely my ex-fiancée's sister. She was someone who had shown me compassion when she had nothing to gain, someone who had remained gentle despite being overlooked, and someone whose presence made me feel less guarded than I had felt in years. I said I did not know what our future would become, but I wanted the chance to know her honestly, without Madeline's shadow standing between us. Claire cried then, not dramatically, but with the exhausted relief of someone finally permitted to stop hiding. I did not kiss her. A kiss would have been too easy and too quick. Instead, I sat beside her on the living room floor among the scattered books, and we talked until the afternoon light softened. We spoke about Grant, Madeline, Harold, the failed wedding, and the years we had both lost trying to appear unaffected. For the first time, Claire admitted she was angry with her sister. For the first time, I admitted part of me had stayed emotionally loyal to a future that no longer existed. We did not make promises. We simply told the truth. 2 weeks later, Madeline arrived from California. She came during a bright Saturday morning carrying expensive flowers and a guilt she tried to disguise as confidence. Harold was happy to see her but no longer willing to excuse her absence. Claire finally told her how alone she had felt. Madeline listened defensively at first, then broke down when she realized her family had learned to live without expecting her. Later, Claire told Madeline about us. There was no relationship yet, only lunches, walks, and the careful beginning of something neither of us wanted to rush. Madeline stared at me for a long time before saying she did not have the right to object. Still, the conversation was painful. Madeline accused Claire of waiting for her failure. Claire replied that she had spent years protecting Madeline from the consequences of her own choices. I expected their relationship to shatter, but Harold interrupted with a truth none of us could avoid. He said love was not a prize one sister could steal from another. It was a responsibility, and the person who valued it had to be brave enough to care for it. Madeline left the room in tears. Claire did not chase her. That was the first boundary she had ever held with her sister. The turning point came later that afternoon when Madeline found me alone in the garden outside Harold's room. She admitted she had known about Claire's feelings long before our engagement. She had noticed the way Claire looked at me and pursued me partly because she could not bear the possibility that her quieter sister might be chosen first. The confession stunned me. Madeline said she had spent her entire life confusing attention with love and victory with happiness. Leaving me had been cruel, but marrying me would have been worse because she had wanted the wedding more than the marriage. She apologized not only to me but, eventually, to Claire. Forgiveness did not happen instantly. Claire needed time to believe Madeline's remorse was real. I needed time to release the final bitterness I had carried. Harold needed to stop imagining that every family wound could be healed by forcing everyone into the same room. Yet slowly, something changed. Madeline began calling her father every morning and visiting once a month. She listened when Claire spoke instead of turning every conversation toward herself. Claire learned to ask for help before exhaustion became collapse. I learned that protecting myself from pain had also protected me from joy. Claire and I began with ordinary things. We drank coffee beside the harbor in the late morning. She visited the workshop and helped me design a reading bench for the children's section of her library. I attended a school book fair where her students treated her like the most important person in the world. Watching her kneel beside a shy child and patiently help him sound out a difficult word, I understood the depth of her gift. Claire did not shine by demanding that people look at her. She made other people feel seen. Nearly a year after the move, I brought Claire back to the apartment doorway where she had first confessed her feelings. The same afternoon sunlight filled the hall. I gave her a small wooden box made from walnut taken from the damaged shelf I had repaired on moving day. Inside was a ring, but I did not ask her to accept it as proof that fate had corrected a mistake. I told her she was not my second chance at the life I lost. She was my first chance at a life built on truth. Claire said yes with tears in her eyes and laughter breaking through them. Harold cried when we told him. Madeline cried too, but this time there was no jealousy in her face. She asked Claire whether she might be allowed to help with the wedding, not control it, not lead it, simply help. Claire took her hand and said they could begin again as sisters, but only if they continued telling each other the truth. before this story ends, leave a meaningful comment about a time when honesty, forgiveness, or a second chance changed your life. Do you believe some people enter our hearts at the wrong time, only to return when we are finally ready to see them clearly? Your words may give hope to someone who feels overlooked, abandoned, or afraid to begin again. Claire and I were married on a bright spring afternoon in Harold's garden. There were no grand decorations, no harbor venue, and no attempt to create a perfect picture. The children from Claire's library carried wildflowers. My employees built simple wooden benches. Madeline stood beside her sister, smiling through tears, while Harold watched from the front row with pride softening every line in his face. When Claire walked toward me beneath the sunlight, I did not think about the wedding that had never happened. I thought about boxes falling open, old truths spilling into the light, and the quiet woman who had spent years believing she would never be chosen. Some people mistake being chosen for being loved. Real love is not about winning someone before another person can. It is about seeing them completely, honoring what they carry, and remaining when life becomes inconvenient. Claire had loved quietly because she feared honesty would cause harm. I had lived cautiously because I feared love would hurt me again. We both had to learn that silence can wound just as deeply as rejection, and that healing begins when people stop pretending their hearts have nothing to say. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Claire once believed she had lost her chance because someone else had been chosen first. I once believed my greatest love story had ended at a marina beneath a cold, beautiful sky. We were both wrong. Sometimes the life meant for us does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently at the edge of our pain, carrying boxes, remembering our kindness, and hoping that one day we will finally turn around and see it.